Good evening and welcome to the November 21st, 2016 meeting of the Merrimack School Board. If you could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item number 2 is public participation. If you have comments from the public, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we will close public participation, and we will move on to item number 3, which is the Planning and Building Committee's response to the school board charge. We invite to the table Chair of the Planning and Building Committee, Rich Hendricks. Welcome, and great seeing you.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening to you. You were given a brief summary in your packet last week of basically what other schools are doing with their turf fields, how they were financed, what they're doing for them, where they've been constructed. Honestly, I think the most important thing of me being here tonight is to start the dialogue of all this. Because a lot of these, although a lot of fields were done on taxpayer money, a lot were not. And the feeling of the committee is we don't know that person who is out there, who is saying, hey, I was an athlete, I've done pretty well, you know, this is a project I could get behind. It could be my company, it could be individually. You know, we don't know who the donors are if we don't bring this, you know, to the public and say, hey, we're really interested in this, and this is something going forward. So to me, that's the most important thing of all, is that we've, you know, I was here 4.5 years ago. We went through the pros and cons of the actual fields, and now we're going into more of a little bit of a brief report of, well, what have other schools found and how they finance them. So, put that as my Bible. All right. It had schools, when the field was installed, the cost, how it was funded, maybe some comments that were made from athletic directors, and then were there donations made or were there sponsorships for those fields, not taxpayer provided. We picked Manchester West, Sohegan, Bedford, Oyster River, Exeter, Laconia. Get right to it. Most of these are fairly newly installed. Sohegan, of course, was just this year. Oyster River was just this year. Laconia was some 3 years ago. Bedford was 7 years ago. And Manchester West is actually replacing their field this year. They originally installed it in 1998. I did ask that athletic director. I'm hearing, between 9 and 11 years is your typical range of usage on this. And you got some 16, 17 years out of this. The field they used back in 1998, 97, obviously is quite different than today. They have a field that actually wears. When that field was obtained, she said the actual grass was some 3 inches high. Today it's 1 inch. So it basically is amounted to being a carpet. Today that type of field doesn't even exist. So that is why you have kind of a weird time length there. Today's fields do not last 18 years if they're used in their intended usage. The fields pretty much are what we calculated, about between $800,000 and $900,000 on average. Funding, we have everything. We have taxpayers, we have private donations, and we have a mix, some taxpayer fund and some donations. Some are public donations and some are private. Additional comments that are just kind of reiterating what we did 4 years ago. The obvious advantages, obviously you don't mow these, you don't water them, there's no seeding, there's no fertilizing, there's no chemicals. One thing that becomes imperative in this field is all the pesticides, the chemicals and seeds and whatever we use on our field basically gets washed right down into the Sohegan River, which is literally downstream from our current field. So you'd be saving an enormous amount of pesticides going into our local rivers. Now, funding and donations. I'll go into some detail. Sohegan had one $500,000 donor. However, he made the stipulation that I'll do this, but you have to provide the rest of the money within the calendar year. The $400,000 was all raised by private donations, public donations, let me rephrase that. Laconia, I'll give an example of how their money was raised. That was some sponsorship and some public donations. Oyster River, that was just built, is a partial fund, partial taxpayer. Anyone who has done these fundraisers, each of these communities has created a committee of several people that raises the money, that's in charge of it. They don't put it onto one group. They don't say, well, the school board has to do this or the town has to do this. They can be, 9, 15-member committees that go out and do this. So that seems to be kind of an imperative thing. Timeline, when private money is used, basically these people want the field and they want it now. The man made the donation in Sohegan in May of 2015, and in September of 2016, the football team was on the field playing. I believe it was, I wrote down here, May, he made the offer. By August, the school board approved that they would go forward with it. By December, they had raised $300,000 out of the $400,000 that remained. And like I say, in September, the field opens. Amherst kind of already had a funding mechanism. It's something called the Amherst Community Foundation, which is a 501c3 charity that already exists that funds a lot of things in that town, and they just kind of picked up the ball and went with this one as well. So the donations don't go to the Merrimack School District, they go to these committees. And of course, having money, they're bonded and all that. Now, not everyone's got $500,000. They came up with just a level of giving levels. Very simple. You you get a dedication and a plaque for $50,000. For $10,000, you get your name on a website and a little smaller plaque. You get champions, which are between $1,000 and $10,000. Captains, between $200 and $1,000. Players is a $200. It's a brick with your name on it. And a booster is a $100 brick, name on the website, and again, your name on the wall. So you've got a town where not everyone, people gave anything from $500,000 right down to $100. And out of that, they raised some $390,000, $410,000 from that. And that was all done through the Amherst Community Foundation. So there was no taxpayer funds used at all in that particular situation. I looked at Laconia, which also was done, and purposes of people watching at home, they actually have a whole website that you can go on and contribute money. And it's very much the same as Sohegan, although they had all sorts of things. They have stairs, that granite steps that the field is, below ground level. So you've got pavers, you've got stairs for $5,000, you've got Wall of Fame, which are $10,000 to $25,000. You can sponsor the press box for $50,000. And they still use the brick pavers 4x8s, which are $125, or a brick for 8x8 for $250. And that was in conjunction with a $250,000 donation from the Bank of then Laconia, now Bank of New Hampshire. There were no strings attached. The gentleman happened to be on the Board of Education and the president of the Bank of Laconia, and said, this is something I want to get behind. Again, if you don't put that out there, you don't know who wants to contribute to this. And he gave $250,000. I gave you a little, the little chart I gave you a week ago does list $1 million, but that, Laconia did a whole thing. It was with lights and seats. And they also put that tied into all sorts of things. They added to their high school. So this was a huge $16 million project going on in Laconia, of which this was a little part of it. But the actual field and whatnot was done between private donations and the $250,000. So you have the Bank of New Hampshire Stadium. I will add the actual name was actually named after Coach Fitzgerald, who had been there for some 30 years and has developed ALS. As a matter of fact, Channel 9 did a story on him beginning of the year. So the field is actually Fitzgerald Field, but obviously it had nothing to do with the money. So it is still Bank of New Hampshire Field. And again, they everything from $50,000 to simply $100, and people contributed. This was a thank you put in the local paper of all the people that had donated. I can actually make this out for you later. It has everything from the Laconia High School class of 67, 72, 79, 83, 91. You've got companies, you've got individuals, you've got some family trusts involved. So, everyone did get behind this project. Again, you don't have to be a corporate owner. And they did it. Oyster River was on the list. That's a little different funding. They bonded $500,000. They raised $300,000, very similar manner. Although in full disclosure, and I don't know what this was from, but they had a lawsuit that they received $400,000 from. And the superintendent put that into this budget. Like I said, I could not find out what that lawsuit ever stemmed from, but that provided 1/3 of the funds for their field. But the rest of it was done bonding and fundraising. So there's all sorts of different ways of funding it. And then Manchester West and Bedford and Exeter were all taxpayer funded. Bonded it, and away they go. Bedford, of course, was part of their whole new high school complex. So they estimated the actual field was probably $850,000, but you also have to add the excavation and all that other stuff into it. So they felt the field itself would be $850,000. Again, that was part of this multi-million-dollar project that did pass. One of the things that's been asked is, okay, we have our high school fields. What else can we use them for? I found most of them use youth football on Sundays. Sundays is a dead time for those fields as far as high schools are concerned. I know Amherst Patriots, Laconia, Bedford, I forget what their team is called, all use them on Sundays. What I found is people will typically not charge if it's an in-town organization. The Manchester West athletic director said they would charge something like there was a Bedford lacrosse club, so they were charged. Drum and bugle corps, I think, are a huge benefit. They have to have a field. They can't be out in the mud and the grass because they're run on precision, and you have to have those hash marks. That's something we could never provide, a drum and bugle corps. There's quite a few of them down at Stello Stadium. So that's something you could pursue. I don't know what they get for them, but that's pure money. Bedford actually has you actually go on a website and you can reserve the field, and they get just to give you an example, they give $100 for every 2-hour block that you use their field. It's different for a softball field, it's different for a thing, but the actual turf field at the high school, if it's a night event, they get $200 for a 2-hour block. And you need to apply about 5 to 6 months in advance, and you actually go through the town rec and park department to get it. So, there is other uses. Some are charging, some are not. Soccer is not usually used because football has a very finite amount of people and finite teams. That seems to run well. I don't know how soccer would quite fit in there, like an MYA. If you look at just, using our Cardinals, I believe there's 4 divisions, Mites and Mighty Mites and stuff. If you figure an hour and a half per game, that brings you up to about 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. And that's not leaving much time for anyone else to really use it. So I did not see a soccer team using those fields. So that's kind of the summary. None of the athletic directors had anything negative to say. The sooner the better. They love them. There's certainly some significant money savings. Oyster River just did this and had a really, on their website, had a whole 10-page how they proposed it and the savings. They looked at the annual cost of a field right now being about $24,000. their annual maintenance of a turf field is between $2,500 and $3,500. We asked Tom back 4 years ago. He estimated our particular field cost between about $8,000 and $11,000 to maintain, depending on, if there's a lot of rain, if there's not a lot of rain, how much pesticides and fertilizers need to go. One thing that came out of that report is we spent 160 hours mowing the grass. We also spent 120 hours painting the lines on the field. That's an enormous amount of man cost. Man hours. So we found different ways. Again, there's ways to fully or partially pay from them, everything from $100 bricks right on to corporate sponsorships. There was nothing controversial. Nobody was using banks no one had a problem, obviously, having a bank name it. Fields can be revenue generating, and people in school districts are using them as such. And the only thing about private funding is people that donate want the fields used now. That man made a stipulation that at the end of the year, if the money's not raised, I'm not doing this. And by then, 3/4 of the money was raised, and he said, okay, it's a go. That was one thing that came through. That's, it's a small sampling, but that's pretty typical what we found. We either individually talking to people, or actually a lot of this is, like I say, on websites, so it was convenient for us, particularly in the charts about how much they charge for contributing. So I'll leave it at that.
Questions? I see Andy already. And then Michael.
So this is really good. You went to all the different districts and fields and stuff. It sounds like the ones where there was fundraising, there was a lot of support behind getting them done. We know that when we've talked about this in the past, there's concern about the negative effects of the field, the cancer issues and potential and things like that have been out there. In your research, did you find any places where there was pushback against putting these kind of fields in?
Funny you should ask.
And honestly, I did not. He did not.
No,
ask that question.
We didn't go. Hey, I got a question for you. This is an article that was put in a Amherst type cabinet, the old cabinet paper. They did a public meeting on this, even though it's donated. There are concerns, legitimate concerns. Paraphrasing it, about 75 people attended at the Sohegan Theater for the forum. Only one person spoke out against the plan. They had a committee member whose background is in occupational and environmental chemical exposures, and put to rest a lot of the artificial grasses and filled with the tiny crumbs made from vehicle tires and the dusting of those things. And he went on to New Jersey has done extensive research on it and decided it's safe. The biggest thing is the heat in the summer, honestly. And maybe in years to come, they will invent a blade that, quite honestly, can absorb the sun and doesn't give out as much rate. But he used, and there's all sorts of things that he used from the Environmental Protection Agency. He found no adverse health effects. It does have to be washed. On the maintenance of it, Manchester West has something they attach behind basically their little tractor, and they just go along and sweep it up a little bit. The town has one rather large sweeper that they use twice a year, and that is removing any metals that happen to fall, gives a real cleansing, hate to say dead skin, that type of thing. And then they do rinse it off. You don't want the pollen because it will discolor it after a certain period of time. So maintenance is kind of low, but it does have to be done. So that kind of reduces the I think what people are concerned about is on the rubber. I guess there's I can't think of the word, like a pollen to it. But study after study after study, like I said, 75 people, one, had an objection, and didn't seem to be a problem after that.
Okay. Zeb?
I don't know if this is a question for you or for the rest of the board. Does anyone know does Merrimack have a charitable foundation similar to the one used in Amherst to generate or raise money if we do choose to go through the private funds method?
Not to our knowledge.
No.
No.
So we would need to establish one if we did choose to raise money through that manner.
The community would, we
community
wouldn't
will.
as the board.
Not through us.
Right, we're kind of the governmental thing, so if the community wanted a charitable foundation in the community, I don't think it would be the town either, honestly. I think it would be the people of the community would create a 501c3 if they feel that there's charitable endeavors they want to support. So it would be outside of any governmental bodies.
I mean, the board actually, somewhere in Sohegan, they raised a certain amount of money. And that apparently that particular foundation's, I guess, been around for a while. The board actually has to vote to accept that money. I mean, it's fine for me to give money, but, you know, one of the things on the ballot every year is, you know, do you accept money? You know, tonight you're accepting a certain amount of money. When you start talking hundreds of thousands, that's something the board actually has to approve. But so basically that's because we did it directly through the school district, and for some reason, gee, you didn't get enough money. You know, there's Matt writing, you know, 2,000 checks to people who gave. So, yeah, it would have to be created, but it would not be through the school board. Absolutely.
Yeah, we would have to do the same thing if such a structure exists. We have the same comparable. I think it's over $5,000, and we have to have a public hearing.
Yeah, anything over 5,000 public hearing, the same rules we've been playing by. If we were to accept a charitable donation from a 501c3.
Excellent. Are there any other questions regarding Michael?
I just had a comment. I wanted to just thank you very much, Rich, and the team that put this together. I think it's great information. I think it's definitely very helpful. And based off of the cost of the track and stuff like that, I think that this is a great way to kind of look at it and see if there's different avenues to actually try to raise the funds. So
That was kind of the point of it. It's like, what are others doing? I mean, there are obviously other fields, and most of them, frankly, were done taxpayers, but these seem to be unique in that we kind of got somebody that did it all, partially, and then we did get one that, you know, there was a company that gave a good chunk of money and said, you know, hey, name it for us, and the board was like, okay. There didn't seem to be, I didn't see any much discussion on that, but again, it's not, I understand if, you know, your concerns if a brewery comes through, you know, do you really want to, you know, you get into, that's when you get into your complex issues, let's face it. But, you know, so all the banks out in Merrimack, please listen in carefully, because
Banks are good. So the only question I had, and I think that, you know, you're talking about Manchester West, and theirs lasted 18 years because they used a different material. Now they're expecting it to use less. So I think it's more of a statement than a question. But this is something where we would not be looking to bond it. Like we're talking about other large expenditures, it'd be $1 million. But just like the roofing, we would not be bonding it because it's something that will be recurring about every 10 to 15 years. So it would be a recurring expense.
we looked at, you know, if I don't mind interjecting.
no, please do.
Kind of our back of our mind is this is the perfect example for a capital reserve fund. You know, if you put a replacement field is a little less because you don't have to start from scratch. So let's say you put $90,000 in every year. Then when you get that 10th year, you've got it. As opposed to, like you say, you know, the roofs obviously aren't bonded and stuff like that. That was just kind of one of our thoughts. This would truly be because you have a known entity. This is, you know, a roof we hope is going to last 30 years, might last 25, might last 35. This is pretty much going to be that 9 to 11 phrase. So that just, we would hope that would be a good use of capital reserve funds.
Excellent. And that's good insight for, you know, as you're deliberating what your suggestion would be, that's good insight for us as well. I think we would probably look along the same lines as we are with things like long-term roofing. Michael?
Just a follow-up. So they gave naming rights to Bank of New Hampshire, former Bank of Laconia. Do you know if they gave unlimited naming rights, or did they limit it to like 10 years or anything like that for renewal?
I don't honestly know, but I
just wondered if you.
I mean, if the bank gets rebought and someone else, you know, do they rename it or something? That I don't know. I didn't see anything in anything that said X years. So
Thank you.
Right. Andy?
One of the things that we've talked about off and on, because there's a statement that says Merrimack has never had anything sort of sponsored in terms of this stuff. I'm not sure that's completely true, because if you look at every one of the scoreboards that's around town, it has soda logos on them. So I was wondering if one of the takeaways, sort of to feed back to the planning and building, if there's any way somebody could find out the history of where those scoreboards might have come from. I don't know if you, okay.
Yeah, I know the history. The scoreboards that you see, they all have Pepsi on there. It was Pepsi put them up. They put them up for nothing. We signed a contract with them for 10 years, stating that in the school district we would sell nothing but Pepsi products. That includes Dasani water and everything like that, just not soda. But it was a 10-year agreement, and now that agreement's been up for around a good 5 to 6 years. And then when we did a scoreboard, I believe, over at the upper elementary school, those came in a little bit later. We extended it by another couple of years, so it was around 12 years in total. But that was the commitment.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I think we're scheduled to see you soon on our next charge.
Yes.
So I believe it's February is the original goal.
Yep, no problem.
So we look forward to seeing you again, and thank you for all your continued work. Thanks. And now we're on to item number 4, which is the District Communication Committee, review draft of a parent survey. We're going to invite to the table Chair of the committee, Nancy Rhodes. And as it's well known, we do have 2 board members that are also part of the committee, Cinda and Michael, who I'm sure will have lots of feedback from meetings they've attended. So thank you very much, and welcome, Nancy.
Hi, thank you. Welcome. So I was just going to kind of run through the group formed roughly, the committee was formed roughly in September. We got kind of a late start, and we had a core group that met to kind of set the vision for the committee at large, and agreed fairly quickly that some common themes that we were seeking were consistent, relevant, streamlined, and timely communication. We knew that we wanted to address issues that people had specifically, not just things that we sat around and dreamed up. So we decided to do a survey and started working on drafting a survey at that point. The initial focus, or the focus that we're looking at initially, is the communication between the school district and families. So that can be from the classroom level all the way up through the entire district. The core group formulated a survey draft, which we then shared with the committee at large. The large group met at the end of October. We had a fabulous discussion. The core group has a representative from each group, so there's an administrator, teacher, parent, and me. And then the larger group has multiples of those, so that all of the schools are well represented, and had a lot of revelatory things come out of that conversation. And I think, in a way, the district doesn't have a communication coordinator or manager. There are places that have that kind of a position, and we simply don't. So some of this, it was the first time it was really being kind of aired or talked about. So I think it was useful to just kind of get some of this stuff on the table. We worked on the survey that night and then did revisions via email, so that we had, I think we're on, the one that you have in your packet is about version 4. And that's what we're here looking at. And ideally, depending on what you think of it, we'll put it out to the public, or to the parent groups. I'm sorry, not just the community at large, starting after the Thanksgiving season. I think that it took longer to edit it and get feedback and get things together. We were hoping to do it prior to the Thanksgiving holiday, but I feel like it would get lost in the wash. And Dr. McLaughlin and I talked and thought it made sense to maybe do an announcement, or start to put a notice on the websites starting tomorrow, so that after the holiday break, we can put out more information and more ability to access it and publish the survey. We'd leave it open for a few weeks and then start to gather the data and pull that together for the committee as a whole, the larger group, to review. And then using that data, what we get back on the survey, set some goals that are short, middle, and long range, so that we can get working. And I think that we probably will break the large committee, there's about 21 people, into smaller working groups, so that we can kind of work on multiple things at once, and then continue to meet through the year and see where we stand at the end of the year. see what we get done if there's things that are remaining. I think one thing that this survey won't do that we probably will look at before too long is communication between the school district and the community as a whole. So that would be more about larger events, budget processing, the things like he was just talking about. So that's really all I had.
Excellent. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Michael?
I just, obviously a member of the committee, but I wanted to actually thank the initial committee for the time that they spent to actually get it to the first phase that they brought to the committee. I thought it was very well done. I thought that the input was very good. And I'm happy with the first step of the communications committee to actually get some more information and move forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Cinda?
Yeah, actually this, I think I would just add, I think Nancy did a great job of summarizing what we went through in the first two meetings. I was part of both of those meetings. And I would say there was also, I think, a lot of aha moments when you get so many people from different schools together and parents. I think there was a kind of a big eye-opening of, some of the things that, some of the opportunities for consistency and some of the opportunities in realizations of where, as parents go through the district, there's inconsistencies with how they get information. And I think overall, just the breadth of information that comes from all different places. And we also had the realization that we can't solve everything, all communications, all right away, but what are some of the things that we can tackle right away? We thought the survey was a really good way to start and kick this off because it gives us a baseline, and it also gives us some really good feedback from what parents are feeling and what they think. And so we thought that this was a good way to start and kick off the whole process.
Thanks for saying that. I think one of the things that was very eye-opening initially in the very first few meetings was there's a granularity that goes down to the student correspondence directly to the parent, like what they need to know about their child, all the way up to the district needs to share information with you, and then all of the different modalities. And as we were trying to look at it, it was a many-headed hydra that never stopped moving. And so I think this is one way to try to get at maybe kind of slicing it up so that we can at least digest some of the needs or where we're doing things well and can set those aside and work on some of the bigger issues. So, but you put that well. Thank you.
Andy?
So if you said this, I missed it. What's the delivery mechanism for the survey?
It's actually through the new website. There's a survey tool, and then we also will have it available in paper. We'll try to make it a little nicer than the text that you have, but making it available in paper, and that would be probably on a request basis rather than doing a broad mail out, but have them available in the schools and the SAU,
So the
but
tool
primarily online.
So the tool, it'll go through and guide them to the sections they need to answer and allow them to skip by an X section that doesn't apply to them, or?
Yeah, it actually tells you to apply it as it is relevant to you. So
Okay.
yeah.
Actually, I had a couple thoughts as you were going through. And first is, do we know what percentage of our district parents have an email or cell phone on file for texting?
I can defer to Matt. I know that varies based on the different schools, but that would be the reason for doing. We probably will do like a school messenger alert so that everybody gets that notice, because I think we reach everybody with the school messenger alerts.
Yeah, with the cell phones, we can reach everybody with a verbal message, and it would email them a WAV file so they could listen to it. That's pretty universal. As far as the schools go, it varies according to school and grade level, how many emails we have on file, depending upon the timing that online registration was done this year. So we have some schools that have like an 84% records of emails and others that are around more like 50%. So it does vary. So because of that, we'd have to try multiple modalities to kind of reach people. The easiest one is just to say, make an announcement, Alert Now. Everybody gets those. Not Alert Now, School Messenger. Everybody gets those. And then the emails would be a good way to follow up for it, to put the link to the actual survey in the body of the email.
And then one other thing that Dr. McLaughlin and I were talking about is to notify staff internally, because there's communication between the classrooms and the students and the families that way. So to use that mechanism, there is a conduit there. So,
Cinda?
I was going to say exactly that. That was one thing we discussed, was that coordinating through the leadership teams at our various schools and kind of working, because there are certain people that they already know that they communicate with and paper and whatnot. So it was just one other aspect of trying to get the word out about the survey.
Excellent. And my other question was, and you brought it up and you skimmed it, which is, I'm glad you did, was that some districts have communications directors or personnel that just deal in this space. I'm not saying that we have that desire right now, but I'd be interested to know what the job descriptions of different ones are, to see what their charges are, and with that we can look at maybe areas we haven't even explored yet for communication opportunity. So just by going through what different districts are doing with personnel just dedicated to that role. So I want to see what we can do more organically with internal talent. So and I know you guys are very well connected around the state with peer districts, and as well as even some in Massachusetts. So I'm sure we can find some good examples. It might help us to do a comparative. So those are my comments. Were there any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, thank you so much. We look forward to the survey going out and
Thank
seeing
you.
how the results come in, volume and what actually comes of it.
thank you, and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. And we're on to item number 5, which is the update on special education. And I invite to the table Director John Fabrizio. We're queuing up some technology as well, so.
Good evening. I'm going to start, and then about midway through I have some technology, but I think I'm going to kind of go off some paper first, and then we'll get to that along the way. There's a few items that I have tonight, so I feel the need as a former classroom teacher to have everyone get up and stretch first, but I think I'll forego that and just kind of begin with my presentation. So in your packets, I provided you with kind of a letter I wrote to Marge to kind of organize tonight's information. And to begin with, it's always nice to begin with good news, so I'll start there. And one of the first things that we receive every year is kind of our report card from the state, and it comes in and it's called our determination report. And what our determination report is, it's based on a federal regulations with the IDEA, Individual Disabilities Act. And each state must place performance criteria for each of their districts in an effort to require them that they are meeting compliance areas, and they are all separated into things called indicators, and we have several indicators. And you will see by this year's report that again since the year 2005, 2006, we have got a complete score of 0. And it's one of those reports where you're happy at the end of the day that you received a 0 on. And we did. And what that means is for our several indicators, and I'm just going to touch on a few of them to talk about kind of what are they checking on us are? What are things that we have to make sure we're in compliance with? And the first one is indicator 4B. And it talks about ethnicity and the rate of suspensions and expulsions. So with our special ed population in the district, are we having a significant discrepancy anywhere on race, or ethnicity anywhere? And we're not, so that's good. It's a 0 in that. There was no findings of that. So then indicator 11 talks about our evaluations. Do we have one subgroup of ethnicity or race that we are over-identifying or over-evaluating? And the answer is we are not. We are in compliance with that. Then indicator and indicator 11. All right, we talk about our evaluation of special education complete within established timelines. Every year we go through and we have to take a sampling of a month of time and say within all those the year prior, all those evaluations that we did, were they done within a timely manner? And again, they all were, and we were a 0 again in that category. So then indicator 12, it starts getting into our special ed, into our early childhood program and into our early childhood preschool. And that, did we do our job and go out and evaluate kids who are turning 3 to provide them services before their 3rd birthday? And the answer is it was found that we were, and there was no indicators of us not doing that. And then we get into indicator 13, which talks about the other end of it for our kids who are transitioning. Did we, from kids at the time they're 16 years old to possibly 21, where we were instituting good transition plans, and were we making sure that they had goals and objectives in place that we helped meet? And the answer is yes, we were with indicator 13. And if you recall, last year when I presented, we just went through a thing called focus monitoring, and they actually came out and they went through about 12 files of students who were identified at the high school, and they went through and they looked at their transition plans, and they went through with a fine-tooth comb to see, did we meet all the criteria of those transition plans, and we were in 100% compliance for that. So that's why we have that rating. And then we get into indicator 7, again, preschool special ed programs data, and we're going to talk a little more about the prompts data and the indicator data a little later in my presentation. But that's really saying, are you meeting the needs of those children within your preschool programs? And the answer was yes, and we're there. Then we get into talking about some of our financial things, our audit, our IDA grant management, our maintenance of effort, our IDA, and then more about grant management. Those are the other indicators. And in partnership with Matt Chevenel and I constantly talk about this, and Chris Shanahan in my office, and Sue Lures, and all of the people in Matt's office and my office have to stay in continual contact to talk about our grants and all of our funding that we get as part of our from the federal government, and then it's audited each year. And we have been found again this year since 2005, which I am just impressed with the teamwork that since 2005 we've been able to maintain a perfect score in doing this. So all good news, and that's our district determination report. Again, I presented to you, and long stand running here, and it's it is a collective effort by many people in both all of our schools, in our office, and in the superintendent's office. So I'll leave that to you. And then the next piece, I don't believe I've come to the board with, but it's kind of information that we spend a lot of time talking about preschool here at the board, me sitting at this table. And I said it to, we were talking numbers the other day. I think Mark and I and Marge were talking about it, and we've gone from, in the tenure of my time, this is my 5th year in the position, and I've gone from 60 children in our preschool to now to 120. And now we used to be in one school in my tenure as a principal, and then now as a director. I watched it grow from one school to 2 classrooms to now across 3 schools, and having preschool in all 3 of our elementary schools, which is, again, a credit to this board, a credit to our community, a credit to a lot of people to make that happen. And in doing so, I've also had the pleasure of watch what we call our preschool outcome measurement system, or our POMS. That data just continually rise. And I thought, I was, again, speaking to Superintendent Jaffrey, and I said, Marge, I'd like to present this and kind of talk about what does this mean. So again, it's another federal requirement we have, and we are to determine effective preschool education, all right? And when we go through and we measure that, and it requires us to measure the outcomes of the students as they come in and as they progress by the time they leave us. So it's the first 6 weeks in the beginning they receive some assessments, and then and they continue these assessments throughout the year. And the tool we use is called the TS Gold, and it's a standardized curriculum that we use. It's used across many preschools, and we use it here in Merrimack in our schools. And the district assesses all individual preschool children, It ensures that the data entered into the online system is correct. We retrieve the data from the online system and we report it back to the DOE. And then we continue to communicate with the state about kind of what is our effectiveness with the prompts and where we're going with this. And they've been accurate. So I provided you with the report of the data, and I'll just go through it. In the first outcome, it talks about those children who have entered and exited the program that are below expectations below expectations. And so as they've grown, they increase the rate of growth by the time they exit the program. So they enter at one level and they exit at another. And our target was to have 79% of the kids that entered to exit at a higher level. Well, we far succeeded that target in 94% of our children who entered the preschool at one level were able to make significant growth to the other level, and at 94%. And then those that entered with age expectations and outcome, when they exited the program, they were even at a higher level. So our target was to have 61% of our kids who entered maintain. Well, we exceeded that. Now we have 81% of our students who exit that program maintaining above that average. So those children who enter and exit throughout the program, through the outcomes, they're measured multiple times. And through those multiple measurements, you'll see throughout this chart and data that every time we far succeeded, not to go through every one of the indicators, but we far succeeded not only what the state level was, but what our target was personally. And it seems in every category we were able to do that. So again, Sheila Demers is our preschool coordinator, and the partnership with her and Bridie Bellimer, Emily Carter, and Kim Yarlott and their teams in their buildings has just been outstanding. And again, it's nice when you look at Merrimack and you can see this at the state level that we're succeeding in both of these pretty major reports that come down the way from them. So I just thought it was important to start sharing good news. And there we go. So then my next item, I'm going to move into budget. And on the first item I want to talk about is kind of our bus contract. And I want to highlight for you tonight really three areas. Our bus contract are something that's called extended day activities that we really need to provide for our students who are identified with special needs, and things that those are non-academic extracurricular activities. I want to talk about that a little bit. And then go back to revisit our 5-year plan to install split system air conditioners for students who have the need of climate control.
And John, before you go further on that, you gave us the updated copy at our
Yes.
plates tonight.
Yes.
We'll want to work off of those.
Yes, updated, please, and you can disregard the unupdated copy that was
There you go.
several errors that I noticed when I was reviewing for tonight's presentation. So it's always good to admit your errors, and there's one. So to start with bus contract, and Matt will probably jump in some here too, because the previous contract was negotiated prior to me coming to the position. So this was new learning for me, and it's always nice when you have opportunity for new learning. And Matt's been a wonderful partner in this, and along with Rich Desmond to kind of meet with the different providers and talk about what our needs were. So if you remember a little history, our last contract was a 5-year contract through Provider, and Provider was the provider of our bus transportation. And there's no way of saying it, though, that it was a good deal for the district. It was well negotiated. It had a very reasonable rate. We cost shared with a lot of other districts, which that means is basically if I had a student going, let's say I had a student going over to Amherst, and they would pick up kids maybe along the way in Bedford, pick up Merrimack, go to Amherst, they may do that. And we would cost share the cost of that bus with other districts because they're picking up along the way. And that's how they made the money. If we had a kid as far going down to Arlington, Mass., same thing. If there's other districts along the way that could pick up, they picked up. It brought our costs down for cost of usage and time. And that was how the contract was negotiated. However, that was 5 years ago. And the bad news is when we started doing contracts this year and looking at that, we're looking between a 6 and 7% increase on our overall bus transportation for the year. And I wanted to raise that tonight and talk about it a little bit, so when you see budget in the next few weeks, you'll understand the why behind it, give an opportunity to answer questions. I've met, as I said, with Rich Desmond and Matt, And Rich and I have met with the 3 providers that we are looking at. We have asked in this contract again for newer buses. We've asked for them to maintain the number of routes that we currently have and to maintain, all the things that are required, certified drivers, all the insurances that are expected of them. And that's kind of where we are right now with the negotiation process. Matt, you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, sure. Just so everybody understands the magnitude, when we first entered into the contract for special education 5 years ago, the closest bidder was at least $200,000 a year more than what we got from the provider. So every year we've saved at least $200,000 for 5 years. Adds up to $1 million over 5 years. And even with talking with the provider, which is the current bus company for special education, they said, you're never going to see these numbers again. And it's true, we never will. In fact, when we opened the bids and went through it, I'm looking at these numbers kind of in disbelief. One of the other bus companies was looking at them and asked the question, is this just for one way or is it both ways? So the contract was that good. So now we're going to be in a position where we've gotten 2 quotes right now. We're waiting for a third for another 5-year continuum of the contract. And right now a good estimate is around 7% that we're going to be budgeting for. And hopefully we'll be able to come in on that. And it might be the same carrier or it may be a new carrier. We'll have to see how everything shakes out. We may enter into partnership like we did with provider with somebody who wants our business, who is familiar with us, who we haven't really worked with fully in the past. So that's where we're at right now with special ed transportation.
So I'm going to pause right there for a second and ask if there's questions about the bus contract that I can answer right now at this point.
Are there any questions so far? I guess the only other question I have was I know that we have a contract for our standard buses, and do they also offer special education transportation?
Yes, they do, and they're one of the bidders.
And with that, would it be a different separate contract, or would it be just?
It'd be a separate contract.
Okay.
Yes, in our special ed world, we use the smaller buses in vans actually to do our out of district transportation, and that's what we currently use right now. So it's bid separately because it's a lot more drivers and it's a lot more kind of distance than we currently do.
And there's a lot of parameters. Usually with the regular ed contract, that's easy to go out and bid and get a good price on it because you need X amount of buses. They run for 180 days. They do this, they do that. They do a late run or 2 late runs, whatever it is. And that's easy to quantify. With special ed, it's a little more ambiguous, especially when you get when you put the thing out to bid, you get numbers, you build a budget from that, and then you try and save money by what John was saying, cost sharing. Okay, we have this Bedford kid who's going to the same place as the Merrimack kid because we control 2 districts. We do a cost share with Bedford and split it up accordingly. So how things play out versus how things are bid can be different based upon who's riding with whom and who's doing a ride share. So it's a little not as cut and dry as the regular education. That's why it's bid separate and it's kept separate.
Gotcha. Cindy, you get a question?
It was regarding the cost share, actually. It was just, it's fair to assume that we'll still go through those same motions of trying to get the cost sharing wherever we can and with other districts.
Yeah, and with the bids, what's interesting is some include that and allow you to do that. Others are a flat rate and a wait time, and that's why I've worked so closely with Matt to kind of say, help me understand this, walk me through this. What's this? Why is this one? And you have to. basically figure that out, like which one's a better deal. Sometimes the cost shares, sometimes it's better to have our own bus that goes there directly because of the amount of mileage, because they'll charge you mileage sometimes too to go pick up someone in another town. So you're paying mileage, then you're paying the transport down to the program.
So how does that process work? Do we drive it and coordinate, or is the bus company in those situations
They have
help
a
us find that? I mean,
They have a dispatcher who pretty much we deal with and say that, and we'll ask. We say we have a new child going to this program. Do you have anyone else? And we'll start that conversation and process.
Any other questions? Then we will go on to your next agenda.
And then there's one more item under transportation before I move to my PowerPoint, but I figured while we had a pause, I'd put it up. We have 2 vans that currently are owned by the district that we use for transporting our students in the Get Set program. And these are our students with multiple disabilities. And I talked about Indicator 13 earlier. And one of the things Indicator 13 asks us to do is have transition plans. And often with our students who are multi-disabled in these programs, we educate them till they're 21. And in part of that, there is some pre-vocational skills they have to learn. There is some soft job opportunities they have to learn. And sometimes there's some internships that we do with these students to try to prepare them for beyond school. So we've had 2 vans in district that transport them. Some go to Hannaford, some go to a lot of local businesses too that support them, animal shelters, and we do that as part of their program and their transition program. Well, our vans are aging. They're over 10 years old now, and they have over 100,000 miles on them. And we're dealing, again, Matt and I communicating, saying it's probably time to raise one of those and put it into the budget this year and look at a replacement of one this year and probably another one next year. So you'll see that also included in my budget this year, a figure for that. And I want to kind of raise that and let the board be aware of that this year. Matt, do you have anything else to add?
No, that was a budget, like I said, budgeted item probably 10, 11 years ago when we first brought it up. And it really has, the Get Set program is absolutely fantastic for the kids, and it needs to continue. And having these vans really allows the flexibility of the program as opposed to be tied to a specific driver or bus company or something. It also saves a lot of money. And all the drivers that we have, our staff, and they're on our insurance list of authorized drivers to drive school owned equipment, much like maintenance is. So it's a time saver. It's much better on flexibility, and it really is an integral part of the program, which is a terrific program to get these kids to their job sites and do their training. And so now it's kind of time to replace one of those.
Michael, you had a question?
Yeah, I just have a question in regards to the van. So obviously there's a mutual benefit for both the community and the individual all around in regards to this, but has there been any thought to actually reach out to these businesses to actually possibly help to fund a new van?
We have not thought about that, to ask them for money. They're really doing us a really great service by allowing the program to continue and putting a lot of their own resources into it via training of their employees to work with these kids. So we haven't gone that route.
And definitely, I totally understand that. I think that what they're providing is an excellent service. I just wanted to just put that out there as a thought.
And my question was regarding the vans. Are they standard minivans? Are they specially equipped? Are there things that we should look at that would make what you would call an anomaly for an amount in the budget?
Now, we have one that's a Dodge Caravan, and we have another one that's a Ford 10-passenger van. So we'll talk about which one, but they're both around the same price.
Okay. Excellent. Onward. Thank you.
Thank you. The next piece is kind of, it's a budgetary cost, but it's an exciting budgetary cost. And I have to say that because it's not every day I can sit here and say that there's going to be something in my budget that talks about including more children and things that we do. And I think that's what my next piece is. And I provide you in your packet with a pretty lengthy letter, which is called Dear Colleague, and it was January 25th, 2013, by the United States Department of Education. In the past few years, the U.S. Department of Education has written a few of these Dear Colleague letters, and what they've done is interpreted kind of free and appropriate education and the Individuals with Disabilities Act, and they've really come out and said, this is what it means. And in a very short little PowerPoint I put together tonight, because it's a very lengthy letter, I'm going to try to kind of explain to the board and the community where does FAPE end and access begin, because I think it's important, and I think it's a absolute wonderful thing. I know I've talked to this board about unified sports and some of the things that we've done in our district to try to really be inclusive, and I want to talk about the kind of why behind that right now. So if you'll bear me, we'll walk through this a little bit. So Section 504 is a non-discrimination, Section 504 Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And I'm not going to read too much to you, just to say that it just basically says that we should not discriminate anyone solely on reasons of his or her disability, excluded from participation in denying benefits or subsequent discrimination under the program or activity by federal and financial assistance. So it's basically saying things that were offered that we receive public funding for, we can't discriminate against anyone for. So, again, we receive federal money. We have to make sure to provide things and they're affordable to all students who are handicapped and opportunities to participate in such services and activities. And that's pretty much saying the same thing. So, what is our duty to provide FAPE? Again, we receive public funds. We operate public elementary and secondary schools. We have educational programs. We have to provide free and appropriate public education. Each qualify for, we have to make sure that to each handicapped person that's there, and no matter the nature or severity of what their disability is, we need to provide and consider what the student's needs are. So in the Dear Colleague letter, it talks about participation in extracurricular activities must be aligned in the IEP and necessary component of FAPE. So it's saying that we not only have a responsibility to work with our students within our school day, but then beyond. If these students need to access extracurricular activities, we have to provide the services they're providing in their IEP to allow them to do so. And that's what it's saying. And we have to talk about this when we have our IEP meetings each year. So, non-academic extracurricular activity. Historically, access was enforced by the Office of Civil Rights. And then FAPE under 504 still is a prevailing factor for this. And since 2004 reauthorization, it really became defined more in special ed law. And now in the IDEA, it has to be there. And it says that we consider both FAPE to access students in their educational plan. So the new duties assigned to us in an IEP, according to this letter and according to the reauthorization. Special education and related services and supplementary aids and services need to be provided to the child. Program modifications or supports for school personnel that will be provided and the child participate in extracurricular or non-activities. That comes directly from the law. And I've quoted the law for you up there. Determine appropriate and needed by the child's IEP team. And equal opportunity. Those two factors need to be considered when we're looking at what will the kid participate with in after school, or the student. And again, determined by the child's IEP team to be appropriate and necessary to participate in non-academic settings. Supplemental aids, services, all those things. So these are an example of some of the activities that we may have to provide for: counseling services, athletics, transportation, health services, recreational activities, special interest groups or clubs, referral to agencies to provide assistance with individuals with disabilities, employment for students. So we talked a little bit about our vans and how we move kids around and do things, agencies. Again, to make us for employment available. Those are all things we need to provide for students. So it's a balancing act for our IEP teams. we have to consider supports necessary to access extracurricular activities and all non-academic things, or require such supports as necessary as a component of FAPE. So, in a nutshell, what the letter says for us are two things. One, you'll see on this slide, it talks about being proactive. Don't avoid the conversation. Ask what extra activities that kids want to be involved in, and then turn the discussion to what's needed to have them do that. So, does the IEP require participation in extracurricular activities to access FAPE? If so, why, when, and how? It has to be reasonable. It has to involve relevant district staff in the decision making. So, does equal access equal a guaranteed for extracurricular? No, it doesn't. It's not equal to, but it's got to be a consideration. Especially, and this is probably an important factor that we talked a lot about this, and a few cases have come up that we've had to talk about this. Just because the student is identified, does it mean necessarily that they will make a team that's a cut team? No, it doesn't. It means we have to allow access for them to try, and that's what this says. And a lot of times we don't have to lower performance standards. We don't have to change the requirements of the student to participate. We just have to provide what they have in their IEP to be able to access the program.
John?
Yes.
On that, would an example be like a student who's maybe a very good basketball player, but having to help them to understand the rule books
Yes.
and that kind of thing? So
Yes.
providing staff to
Yeah.
help them to be able to process that stuff.
Or a student with a hearing issue that
Gotcha.
we may have wanted to play football, and or in the band or somewhere else, that we would provide that assistance with them.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And that's pretty, in sum, that's where we are with this one. So I provide you also within your packet an example of I took a snapshot in time. I have a administrative assistant, Michelle Claver at the high school, who is absolutely wonderful and amazing at gathering this information for us and helping us kind of stay on track about what do we have to pay people, how does that work, who did what when, how are we making sure that everyone's covered. And you will see I took a snapshot in time from last year in May. I just went from the 2nd to the 12th, about a 10-day span, and said, here's some different activities. And you will see in this handout that we talk about, track, drumline, again, some more track, unified volleyball, again, tech week, quiz bowl. And it's just an example of this goes on throughout the year and throughout the summer, that we have multiple activities that our students are there. And this sheet really is just about kind of the paraeducator support that we're providing for them. And that's what this is to show you. We have multiple other things that we sometimes need to provide. It's a physical therapist or occupational therapist to allow them to have access, to work with the coaches, to work with the people to show what they would do. We have, in the past, we've had, because we've had multiple kids wanting to bowl. So we funded basically through our funding a paraeducator who was an assistant coach in the team. But really, they were there to help those kids that had some identified needs. However, it was a nice way of adding a second adult to the team and helping all kids inclusively in doing that. So we're creative about how we do it, and we have to provide it. So I'll stop there, ask some questions, and then I'll talk about kind of budgetary implications to that.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, I'll just give you an example. I was our band played at the Salem Invitational. I did see examples where there was support staff helping with kids being able to participate in Color Guard. And honestly, there's nothing more enjoyable than to watch those kids really, soaking in such a big event and really taking a full participation. So there were a couple, I think, that were drummers, and there was some Color Guard, but just seeing them just get folded in and really gain the full experience, you could definitely see that it was building their confidence and building a lot of pride. So it was great to watch. So I definitely see examples where we have opportunities in our district, and I'm sure wherever there's interest, we can provide it. So
right, and we have to by law, and it's always nice when the law requires you to do something which I think is good for students, and this is one of those examples. And so in that, it's about $50,000 that I've taken and put over the three different levels: elementary, middle, and high. And I've separated it out into different increments throughout there. But in total, about $50,000. And really, what that money is, again, sometimes I need to budget for things that kind of may happen. And again, I'm doing this based on good data that I've collected over a year, and looked at it and said that that's about where I am. And sometimes we get into overage in my personnel accounts with the paraeducators because they've had to go for, some of these are, if you notice the time on, some of these are 5-hour days to a band trip or tech week, which is a whole week of doing that. And sometimes we get into that where we're paying some overtime for that paraeducator, because you can't, it's one of those things where you just can't take sometimes anyone who's not qualified and understands the kid and the child, the student and the student's needs. So often it is a para that may be familiar with them. We're doing a lot of cross training. We're doing a lot of kind of drop-in sessions where we try to work with people to kind of show them, meet the kid, learn about what he needs for that activity, so we can use multiple people, so we don't get into an overtime cost. But sometimes the need is just there because the kid has specialized needs.
Cindy, you got a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. What are some examples of where this might apply to children in elementary levels? Would it be like jogging Jaguars, ski trip, that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Is that,
Yes, and yes, and sometimes it's as simple as it's as simple as you may have maybe doing an after school art club, and after school activities that may be kind of a running club in the morning, things like that, a walking club that we used to do at MES. I know that was oftentimes we'd have parents come in early it was before school, and we'd have them help and support kids through the walking club and do that. So sometimes it's there. I know that it sometimes we even get into Lego League, things like that at the upper, and those are opportunities. Sometimes chess club, another one off the top of my head that I can think of. There's multiple opportunities for kids.
but it sounds like it's probably a much smaller amount
Yes.
at the elementary level compared
Yes.
to the high school. That's what common sense would tell me.
Right, and I've graded it that way in the budget.
Yeah.
You'll see that when you see the budget. I've graded it. So the majority is at the high school. It is, because that's where the majority of activities are happening with kids, and they're much more active, and they're much more moving into that world of inclusion where they want to be included in things, and they have that desire, and we have to provide that opportunity, at least let them try.
Matt?
Yeah, you can kind of see this as kind of the same thing that ADA did almost 30 years ago with their architectural standards and building design standards, opening up access to those with disabilities, physical barriers like ramps instead of stairs, etc. It's the same concept. So you think of it as something like that. It's a new law, but it's a law that the time has come definitely for the kids involved.
Excellent. Any other questions from the board, administration? I think we're good. Excellent.
And then my final number 5 on the on my list is split air conditioners, and this is this year you'll see the updated plan, because again, my confession here, when I did the math in my office earlier tonight when I was prepping, I looked and said that doesn't add up, and whenever you're doing math and it doesn't add up, it's never a good thing. So I went back and redid this, and you'll look where it says 2017-18 highlighted, and there's $30,000 that's in the budget for this year, but that is a cut from last year. You remember that was one of the items that was on our cut list last year, and so I've actually reintroduced that for the $30,000 this year. But to continue with the plan, I've also put the $15,000 in for this year that was scheduled in our 5-year plan, which would be 17-18. And which brings the total up. It's a pretty hefty total of $45,000 to put split air conditioners in, but it's to keep us within the 5-year plan in my budget. And I just wanted to talk about that. And for those board members that are new to the table this year, what this is we have students across our district that need tempered control. They need rooms that are kept at a certain degree. And we quite frankly have buildings that don't have that capacity. We have tried for years to use the portable air conditioning units that you take out a piece of the window pretty much and put them in, and they vent out, and they're a portable unit in doing that. Those are amazingly maintenance heavy, and they're really not meant to cool that size of room. So we brought in people from Honeywell probably about 5 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago now. We brought them in, and we said, what would make this room tempered and do what it needs to do. So we utilized these systems in our computer labs prior to this, and we said they're really working well, even with all those machines in there. It's keeping it tempered. So we've installed these in a few areas where we have our most critically medically fragile children. Typically, they come through our preschool program, because I've talked about that earlier today. When they are 3 years old, if they have that severe of a disability, we need to bring them to school, so we do. And then they are in program-based places throughout each of our building. For the majority of the time, they're in more resource places, or we're able to put them in there in days when it's really, and educate them in a room when it's really hot out, when we hit those 90-degree days, and those days that are uncontrollable. So it allows us throughout the building to have kind of these places within our control that are tempered and allow these students to be educated in our buildings. And that's why I've kind of asked, and we started this now. We are in, this will be the 4th year of this plan. Any questions?
Questions from the board? I actually have one, and it's, what's the lifespan for a split unit?
They're all carried under our Honeywell maintenance agreement. So everything's tied into the management system, so everything can be remotely looked at in service. This is the one big advantage between having a system that's built into the way you do things versus the Home Depot air conditioner units. But I would expect life cycle of these to be 15 years, I would say.
Okay.
Going on past experience, because we've had one in the computer closet in the high school for quite some time now. We put a second one in as a backup when we did have some downtime with it. But that's what I believe.
And after the 5-year plan, are we caught up?
That depends on what John's vision is.
It's very interesting. I think that we talked about equal access, and it's kind of interesting. We talk about equal access, and we talk about technology, and we have all these conversations, and amazingly, this problem goes away for us when we get to the middle school, and there's a reason why.
Central air.
The entire building's air conditioned and tempered control. So will there be some day when, we may have more students that are within our halls that need this in more of their places, or more adults under 504s that need these in their places? Will there be a day when that happens? It's possible. Mm-hmm. Right now it brings us to a point of, at least it's in that adequate and meets FAPE, in my opinion.
Yep. Now, I was looking at the schools. You have preschool for Thornton's and MES, which I believe are the 2 newer ones. I don't see Reed's preschool. Does it already have one?
In the first 2014-15, that's the first
so
rooms
that's
that
the
we
preschool
did.
room.
Yeah, we did the multi-disabled room in the classroom, our resource room there, and we did the preschool room. They're right. It says right there, room 2 through 7. It's right down that corridor.
So that preschool's in there.
We did that
okay.
corridor.
Perfect. Yep. Okay, and so that would again equal for all the buildings. So we'd be consistent, because that's the other thing we're looking for is consistency. So are there any other questions from the board? Andy?
So just real quick, so you have a 5-year plan, 30,000 the first couple of years, then there was 30,000 for the next year, which we cut off because of the budget issue. You added that 30,000 back in year 4, and then chose to, instead of moving the 15,000 so that year 5 would be 30,000, you made 45 this year and then less. Is there a driving reason behind that?
To stay with the plan. That was really what it was, and that's where it was. And I decided, and in talking to Marge and Mark when this came up in our conversation, we said, really those things were taken out last year, so let's keep that kind of separate from our thinking right now and then bring them back in. And if we get to a point where we need to modify down the line, we get to the bottom line and we look at things and say we may need to go somewhere else, we'd rather put it on the table to say it was in the plan and then take it off again versus modifying the plan prior to.
Right. So having been down this road a few times in the past, I'm going to ask you the question right now. If you were to move, is there anything that will prohibit you, should a proposal be made, to move Thornton's and Massapequa Elementary into the same year in the fourth year? Is there anything driving you to have one of them in the earlier year because of a lack of an area or something like that?
Currently, right now, no, there's not, and I think that there's not. Again, it just it means more of the portable units that aren't really effective.
Yep.
More maintenance time, more time on Tom Tusso's people to really keep those up and running and maintenance for them, and continual shut them off, turn them on every day, and empty them.
Yep.
There's a lot of these go ahead. These are self-sufficient and they're able to be maintained through the Honeywell system. That's why the kind of sooner the better in some ways.
So, actually, I have a question over to Matt, and you're not going to have the answer today. Maybe you do, but is if we look at doing multiple of these at the same time, is there any economy of scale in terms of a cost savings we could get for biting the bullet and doing like all four at the same time versus individually doing them?
No. If they were at the same school, let's say you're putting 4 units at the same school, we may have a different unit going in that may save us $4 or $5 grand or something like that over the cost. I'm not really sure. That's just my guesstimate. I can take a look at it and ask Tom to run it by Honeywell to get us a quote on something like that. But this is what we have. Usually it's $30,000 for a couple of units for a school.
I'll continue to. It depends on how close they are to each other, and that really what it comes down to. Like when we did Reed's Ferry, it was the rooms we needed just so happened to be in the same row, and they were there. So it was really put all the roof work, everything that had to be done was done at once. So it really wasn't as expensive. When we talk about same thing with the Get Set program. It was they're next to each other. It's when we get like both sides of the building, there is no cost savings to it, or multiple buildings. But we can have Tom. I agree with Matt. We'll have Tom talk to Honeywell, get a more current estimate for that.
Well, what I was thinking of is if you went to a vendor and say, hey, look, we want you to install 4 of these. We know individually they'd be $60,000, and what can you do? And they come back and say, look, we can do all 4 for $50,000 because you're doing them all at once. That'd be good for us to know as a district, because that was, anyway.
Mark?
I just wanted to kind of put a fine point on a point that John made a minute ago. So in my time here, I've noticed 2 things. One of them is that, so I oversee the 504 plans in the district, and there really has been an increase in both student and staff 504 plans related to cooling. I can't explain it. I can't describe each condition that's requiring this is different, but it has increased dramatically in the time that I've been here. And then the second thing about that is something that John mentioned before, and it is what it is. We have to comply, and so lacking any better method, we purchase these air conditioners from Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever. And from the perspective of compliance, we are able to demonstrate that we're doing the best we can given our means, which we must demonstrate. Practically speaking, it is an insufficient method to achieve the goals of the 504 for a variety of reasons, not least because those units really don't cool a space that big, not to mention the fact that the doors frequently open and shut because of the pace of a school day, which has its own impact, and the impact on maintenance is John mentioned it, I just wanted to kind of say it's pretty substantial. They don't complain about it. It's just very substantial, the maintenance, and then the cost of, picking up another one when that one tanks and what have you. So just as an aside, John mentioned it, it's worth pointing out. Those are two things that I have noticed increasing in the last couple of years.
And I think the one thing that you have addressed to us is that when we do have a child that is using one of those Home Depot units, they put the child as close to that Home Depot unit as possible. Well, that creates a lot more noise than a commercial unit would. So the question is, what kind of engagement is he getting from the classroom if he's hearing this unit right behind his or her head? So that's something that we always have to look at, the quality of education being delivered based on the environment that we're giving them. So I'm sure that's a very sensitive issue in your area all the time, John. So just a thought to throw in there. But are there any other questions about split system air conditioning? Without engineering questions, obviously. Then I think we're good.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you, John.
It was a very long presentation, but I appreciate you listening. And like I said, and again, I'm looking forward to further conversation when budget comes out. But thank you and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
You too, John. One thing you can say about special education, there's so many layers of the onion. It's not a short and sweet conversation, but it's always very informative for us. So thank you. So we are on to item number 6. As John's breaking down, the lights are going back up. And that is the second review of the new school board policy for service animals with Mark.
So, thank you. I believe at the last meeting, I think it was Vice Chair Schneider, who asked whether or not or to what degree this policy applies to adults and children and visitors who aren't affiliated with the Merrimack School District. So that would be either as an employee or as a student. And whether or not that fact, or whether or not that required an additional line or something in the policy that would stipulate its provision for those people. So I spoke with Barrett Christina, the counsel for the New Hampshire School Boards Association, and he responded in the following way. If you look at the policy on the first page under service animal defined, he cited this sentence to me. This is the first sentence. Any dog that is individually trained to do or perform tasks for and this is what he wanted me to focus on, the benefit of an individual with a disability, including a physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or other mental disability. So what he said is the policy does not differentiate employee or not an employee or a student or not a student. It is the benefit of an individual with a disability. Then he asked me to turn to page 2 where it's under the heading Access to the School Buildings and Grounds. And again, he asked me to read, in accord with federal regulations, individuals with disabilities shall be permitted to be accompanied by their service animal in all areas of district schools where members of the public, participants in services, programs, or invitees, as relevant, are allowed to go. So the sum of his answer to that question is we should proceed under the intention that this policy applies to all people who would come to our campuses, employees, non-employees, students, non-students, individuals with disabilities, suggests that this applies and that they should be allowed to have their animals.
Do you want to make this an interactive discussion?
Oh, sure.
Sure. So the paragraph right above that on page 2 talks about regular presence of service animals. It says, when a student or employee's disability requires the presence of a service animal in a school building or grounds, there could also be volunteers and other things that are part of the school that have regular service animals. So for me, I understand the part for people that come in and the definitions, but there were places in this policy that talked about the ongoing during a school day. So for me, it talks specifically about student or employee. I think we need to at least recognize that there could be someone else that comes in regularly. It could be a parent, could be a volunteer, could be something. Or Well, that's not regular, though. I mean,
Make sure the verbiage kind of
Right.
flow through, so that should be changed
Right.
to when an individual.
Individuals, that's exactly what I just
individuals or
wrote down,
whatever
as
like
you're
that.
saying.
So, I mean, because it talks about more regular attendance. So to me, it was just inconsistent with the use. So he pointed out the two that were generic, but there were others that weren't. So that's the only key.
Yeah, I think I agree with Andy that I think that just has to flow all the way through, that it should reference an individual instead of an actual
Okay?
specific
So
individual.
could I, just so that I'm completely clear, you're talking about the paragraph above access to the school buildings and grounds, right? That paragraph above on page 2.
Right, that's
Yep.
one of them. There might be another.
And so the recommendation is when an individual's disability, not a student or employee's?
Yes.
Right. Yep, because if you look at permissible inquiries on page 1 of 3, it's a continuation of that in which it actually specifies individual's disability, but then changes to student or employee
Right.
in paragraph 2 of that same section.
So we did, I'm sorry, do you want to?
I think that there's a reason for that difference, perhaps. I think that the idea is not to ask for.
Is your microphone-
Sorry, yeah, I think that I might be misreading it, but I think that the point is that for those who require presence during the school day who are students or employees, the district is going to keep proof of current vaccinations and such on file. It's not necessarily going to do that simply for any individual who visits.
But somebody who's an ongoing volunteer, I mean, it says student or employee. There could be other classifications of people that are regularly in the building during the school day.
What
So-
I would, what I would say is what Barry Christina really wanted to make clear to me is that this policy applies in any one of those cases. There would be no situation where we would have grounds to not allow a person, whether they're a regular visitor to the campus or a periodic visitor to the campus, there would be no grounds under this policy to prevent them from having a service animal as defined in the policy. So I'm just sharing his recommendation was it didn't seem necessary in his legal opinion to change language or verbiage. If the question is there an exception that is not noted in the policy that would prevent that, he said, no, there is no exception that's not noted in the policy. Any person, whether they're periodic, intermittent, or regular visitors, whether they're employed or not employed, or student or not student, would not be denied access to our campus.
The only reason I commented is because there is a section called animals who are employees further on in the agreement that is where the employees would fit. So that, I mean, I understand the intent and the reality, but policies, I just want to make sure that that we're making them generic where they need to be and specific where they need to be, and not mixing the tenses together.
Yeah, another example of that would be like animals for children with educational disabilities or a Section 504 plan. I mean, that's clearly for a student, I think, to your point.
Right. And I guess the question is, would we have rights to require proof of immunization and vaccination for someone who's coming to the campus with a service animal at any time? So that's to me the differentiator. Cinda?
And I think this goes back to the question or the comment that I brought up at our last meeting, which was something about asking for a particular card, because the card in and of itself may let us, I don't know enough about it, but it may in and of itself tell us that vaccinations are up to date, and also minimize the impact of asking, I don't have the questions, well, I do actually. The question whether, in the last reading, it said the district may ask whether the animal is required because of a disability and what work or task the animal has been trained to perform. My comment at our last meeting was, would asking for a card minimize maybe even the delivery of some sensitive information that could be protected, for example? That was, and so in bringing up the immunization, it makes me wonder if that card would also tell us, just by having the card, if an animal would be immunized.
So is that a question that you'd like answered from the School Boards Association?
I think so.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. So just so I'm clear, the question, can you just so I'm clear about what I'm asking?
we say that, I think I just lost it now. Oh, the district may ask whether the animal is required because of a disability and what work or task the animal has been trained to perform. My question is, would it be more appropriate to ask for the certification card? I know that someone I know does have a dog and said that they always have this card, and if you ever wonder, you can always ask, where's the card? You know, what, and if that would tell us if that would relieve us from having to ask what the dog has been trained to perform.
Is it almost like an ID card for the dog in a way?
Yeah, yeah. And if that would and if having the card would mean that immunizations are up to date, or if it's documented on that card somewhere. I don't know what is contained on that card, but I would think it may just go with the dog. Does it go with the dog, the person? I don't. But I wonder if there's some key with that particular card that might be relevant to our policy.
Okay, Michael, and I have Andy.
So I'm just revisiting page 2, the top paragraph, page 2. So after what Naomi said, and rereading it a few more times, actually what it's clarifying is that it's individuals that are going to be within the building often are going to be required, whereas this is not a requirement of someone coming in to go vote. They shouldn't have their records on file. So actually, I think the paragraph is clear with what the intention is for that.
Andy?
Except, I'll follow you, except that there are other people besides students or employees that may regularly come into the building with a service animal. Volunteers, parents are regular.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? I mean,
I guess, yeah.
this is the only section in the thing that mixes student or employee back into.
Yeah,
it
I
makes
think
an assumption.
an individual probably would be too broad, but making sure that's clarified.
Well, or something like an individual who regularly is at the school with the service animal or something.
Then you have to define regularly.
Well,
Right.
I was going to say, Naomi?
If the law requires that service animals, individuals with service animals be granted access to the area, what exactly would happen if somebody did not give proof of current vaccination? We can't suddenly undo ADA in order to tell them they can't be there.
I believe that's true.
Well, except it says here the district shall also require annual submission of current vaccination. So you just called into question the whole paragraph.
Yes, I did.
Regardless of who's bringing the animal in, so.
And I know this sounds very arduous, but this is such uncharted territory for us, and for us to put out a policy, we want to do it as thoroughly without being too granular, where it becomes unable to be managed.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we have a lot of questions because this is definitely, again, a new area for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there are other questions, I definitely think we just want to get a review of paragraph 2, which of permissible inquiries. And then, again, how far we can go with, I guess, the question of the dog's use. And then if we can get an idea of what the card is that we're hearing go with these service animals. I think that's a lot of what I would call tangible content questions. So I think this is one where we're going to look for a third review before we do a fourth for approval.
That's fine. So can I just go over just one more time what
Sure.
I'm going to be asking, just so that I'm clear? So we're going to be asking Barrett Christina about, on page 1, under permissible inquiries, we're going to ask him to review that paragraph with a specific focus on the question of the district may ask whether the animal is required. So on whether or not there is some sort of identification card or identifying card that we could seek that would answer several questions about the capacities of the dog that would kind of streamline the process. That's question number 1.
And part of that would be are we at risk of violating any privacy by asking what work or task the animal has been trained to perform?
Okay.
I think that's the second part to that.
Okay. Okay, got it. And then on page 2, the top paragraph, the question is whether we change the term, the phrase, when students or employees to individuals, but then more broadly, the question then becomes, in the event that we don't have a person who can produce such a document, does that mean that we can deny them access to the building? In which case, we need to get clarification about that. And then finally, well, I think that was it. Is that it? Okay. Okay. Thank you. I will take care of it.
Excellent. And then, so we're going on to item number 7, which is the approval of the November 7th, 2016 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve? Made by Michael. Do I have a second? Seconded by Andy. Are there any edits or adjustments to the minutes? Cinta.
This is along the same lines as what we were just discussing, but on page 7, line 305, it says Board Member Guagliumi asked if the animal order owner should provide a card to prove it is a service dog. And I think I more or less asked if that's something, if a card should be considered for the reasons that we just stated. Secondly, still along the same policy feedback that I gave on line 311, it says Board Member Guagliumi asked if the district would be allowed to provide anything to the animal such as water. Superintendent Chaffrey responded that the policy will be used as a guide, but rather she responded, based on my recollection, that the building administrators would have discretion and that it shouldn't be included in the policy, so that it's not so tight that it can't be administered. That's all I have.
Any other edits? Seeing none, we'll put the minutes to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. On to item number 8, which is the acceptance of gifts and grants under $5,000 with Matt.
Thank you. This evening we have before you from the Watson Scholarship, which is held by the Trustee of Trust Funds for the Town of Merrimack, the amount of $900 to the James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School to support the Lego League teams. Secondly, we have to Thornton's Ferry Elementary School from Barnes & Noble Bookstore, the amount of $159.52 to be used to purchase reading texts. And it was due to the principals' night at Barnes & Noble, where the principals, assistant principal get together and read stories, sometimes dressed in costume, but I haven't inquired as to the manner of garb or costume that was or was not worn that evening. So I don't have that information. So there you have it.
Excellent. Do I have a motion to accept the gifts? Cinda.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the gifts from Watson Scholarship Fund in Barnes & Noble with our gratitude.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Michael. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. On to item number 9, which is other. Is there any correspondence to come before the board? Seeing none, are there any comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Michael.
I had an individual reach out to me in regards to the PFOA issue for the town, and just wondering what the school district was doing about it.
Okay. And B, comments. Any comments by the board members? Seeing none, on to number 10, new business. Any new business for the board? Seeing none, on to 11, committee reports. Are there any committee reports from the board? I have 2. First, last Tuesday, the Greater Woods Subcommittee met, and things that we are keeping an eye on and looking for improvements on are improving signage by name versus just by symbol, improving maps and brochure reworks so that they're better tools. I think what happens when you're so familiar with the properties and the committee is sometimes you just don't see the forest for the trees, part of the pun. But just looking at it from someone who would never have hiked in their life, using what materials we have to go out there and experience the property versus someone who uses it for what you call regular recurring recreation, mountain biking, that kind of thing. So just taking a look at it from a new set of eye point of view and seeing where we may be able to make improvements for signage and materials. And then the outdoor classroom. Nature happens, and when nature happens, it happens to the materials. So the outdoor classroom was built by our logs to lumber probably a good 12 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So because it's and when it started out, there was a lot of wood chipping being put down every year. Things have not been going in on a regular basis, and even the logs that were used to make the benches are starting to deteriorate. So we are looking for strategic ways to restore the outdoor classroom and get it back up and being a high quality facility for our students and the community to use. Now I know we're talking about being an outdoor classroom. It is very close to the middle school, but it is on town property. So although we are users of it, we are not owners of it. So we have to, we definitely want to make sure we're good neighbors and supportive neighbors, but it's definitely not something that the district is looked at to maintain. So I want to make that very clear. So we will be looking at 2017 planning, and we will be meeting in January. We're going to skip December to go over a strategic plan for 2017 and some thoughts that we might have. Maybe the district has some ideas on, especially the outdoor classroom. We will be reaching out to Eagle Scouts to see if anyone's looking for a project. But without that coming forth, we're going to see what ideas we may be able to come up with within the group. Also, the New Hampshire School Boards Association Board of Directors met, and the petition resolution that we put in regarding opt-in versus, opt-out versus opt-in, wow, passed unanimously as written, so there were no edits or adjustments suggested. And a trend that seems to be going with the petition resolutions from other districts is regarding the state supporting full-day kindergarten. And so the question I asked was about how many districts in the state have all-day kindergarten, and the trend is definitely out there. It's just over half of the school districts in the state offer all-day kindergarten. So I know we discussed it as a board, and I just thought that'd be a good non-scientific data point for us to consider as well. That it's definitely the trend, and I know Somersworth just launched theirs this year. Andy?
Do you have a way of finding out in the future when you have conversations as to how many of those districts that do full-day kindergarten, it's fully funded by the public versus parents paying for the part of the day?
Actually, I'm pretty confident based on that it's just part of the school district budget. So it's not a tuition format.
Okay.
So there might be one or two, but I think it's the way we would run it. Cinda?
I just want to thank you for bringing it back to us and raising that question. Thanks.
So, it's interesting the data points you get from going to these meetings, so I'm not keeping it to myself, so thank you. So there are no other committee reports. We are on to the public comments on agenda items. No pressure. Okay, we're going to close it, and we'll take a moment to sign the manifest, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn, or we can just stay. Made by Michael. 22nd, seconded by Andy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And we are adjourned. Thank you and good night.